I actually started in elementary education, then moved into healthcare for a little while, had my first kiddo. And this was about 16 years ago. There was not a whole lot on parenting. There were a few parenting books, really few Christian parenting books, especially those that aligned with the way I wanted to do things. And I knew then there was a little seed planted of there's a vacant spot here. There's help is needed here. And God planted that seed, but didn't really, there was no fruition from it. And years down the road, ended up having my second baby. Was in ministry at this point, working for the church, doing children's and women's ministry. And it was so abundantly clear at that point that there were so many women really struggling with faith as a whole, where their influence was wanted, needed, appreciated, as well as how do we do this parenting journey and raise our children in Christ really well. There was not resources for it. And our generation started sort of the generation of the lack of community a bit. There wasn't as much moms helping moms or generational households. We were sort of on our own figuring this out. And so as I walked into that, I first knew that there were so many mamas struggling with sleep, and I was one of them. And being sleep deprived brings us to such a place of desperation, of darkness. People don't link the lack of sleep with what it does to our nervous system and what it does to our soul, what it can sometimes do to our faith. The amount of moms in pure desperation, feeling like failures, feeling like they weren't called to this motherhood piece, was heartbreaking. And I could sit right beside them in the rocking chair, 3:30 in the morning, sobbing over my child, thinking, I must have heard wrong. I must have heard the call wrong. And so in that space, God just really took that seed that he had planted many, many years ago and said, it's the time. It's the time. And I actually had very dear friends in the church in New York City at that time that spoke over me and said, I'm hearing God tell me that this is the time of harvest.
Oh,
like
wow.
run with this. Yeah.
So cool.
And thank God for affirmation, right?
Yeah. Oh gosh. So grateful.
Thank God. So this space that I'm learning more and more every day, where Christianity, the gospel, really specifically, the freedom of the gospel, the shamelessness of living in the gospel, and parenting and motherhood, and just being a woman who believes in the gospel and believes in the Lord, meet. This murky water place is where I exist and where I coach from. And seeing the beauty in what happens in a family, in what happens in children, in what happens in parenting when we are living from this place of, Tamra and I talk a lot about embodiment, of embodying the gospel, literally living in the shamelessness and running the race for Christ, what that does in our homes, what that does for our children, and what that looks like meshed with the scientific research principles of gentle parenting. How about that?
Well, there's a lot to unpack. I mean, I was thinking through just like the first component of women kind of being boxed into the fact that we're meant to only run in the children ministry realm.
Yeah.
So there's a whole conversation about that.
Yes.
And when I remember when I had little ones and I first went to a church with 2 toddlers, and I was in a space of desperation at that point. I was broken. I was definitely sleep deprived, right? And I definitely think, speaking just to the importance of sleep, not just for your babies, but the sleep for you as a mom or a parent is really critical. But I remember they wanted me to volunteer in the nursery. And I remember feeling shame over the fact that I don't want to do that. I feel bad for the people who are in there because they're doing it week by week by week. But I literally had to say, I actually need to be in the service. Like
Yeah.
I need this distance from my child at this point. I also
Yes.
need to hear what God is saying. I need to worship. I need to just be poured into in this season of feeling completely like I was always pouring out into my kids and my marriage at that point. And feeling that sense of shame in the church with this is not where you're going to, necessarily put your time and energy, but you're so good with kids. I'm like, yeah, I know I'm good with kids, but I need a break, right? I get that. I know that I could teach. I know that I could be the preschool Sunday teacher. I know I'd be great at it, but right now, this is not my season to do that. And so I ended up volunteering in like the tech side and doing like keynote, the presentations and the worship songs and stuff like that. But I was able to still serve in a different place than where they wanted me to be placed, because I was like, anywhere that I can be inside the service, I want to show up, but I can't be with the kids. I'm going to go nutty if I have to drive back another 30 minutes after just spending with crying babies. And
Yes.
so I think there's a whole conversation to that. And I would love to hear, like, how do we step out of one, positioning women only in that frame of mind when it comes to our kiddos associated to the church? And then simultaneous to that, like, what do you speak into the mom who has the mom guilt for not wanting to be with their kid all the time? And I want to make sure that we're gender neutral in this, because you serve men as well. You serve,
I do.
and I think dads have this same sense of feeling depending on what placement they are in their realm as a parent. So I'd love to hear your feedback.
Absolutely. First, touching on that, I'm able to give my testimony from a place of a mom, from a place of a woman, but my heart for fathers and what men as a whole, what the male fatherhood piece as it evolves here in this beautiful season of realizing how much men can do, are doing, that we're both living in this stigma. So much compassion for
That's
both
good.
sides.
Yeah, that's good.
And what it comes down to is parenting as a whole. We all feel guilt. It is the most driving force in our parenting, is what I'm learning. Um, the amount of parenting decisions that are made out of this guilt, shame-filled place, as opposed to this place of freedom and just joyfulness. That's where we need to shift the perspective, actually, living in the freedom of Christ. But as to the question about women in the church and this position that we're put in, often it's getting better, right?
Yes, thank the Lord.
Always, always showing up from a place of compassion and curiosity comes first. And first and foremost, that comes towards ourselves as parents, as women or fathers, men, coming from a place of compassion and curiosity. Why? Why am I being asked to do this? Is it truly my zone of genius? Is it truly my realm where I'm called to serve? Or is it simply because, right, there's I think it's called the lullaby principle, where because we've heard it so long, we've seen it done this way so long, we're just accepting it. We're just accepting it. There was a great sermon given by the pastor at my church the other week about this, about how we fall into these ruts often in the church of, because it's been working and it seems to work, we just continue going that direction. And the same thing happens with parenting, as women, that we're put into these categories and we stay there because there's comfort there. There's discomfort in growth. So first, looking at it with curiosity and compassion, why am I here? Why are we in this place? And then looking at it with compassion as to, that makes sense. It makes sense that that's where women have served, but where am I actually being called? And what does it look like to move into that space in the freedom of the gospel, and that we can do all things through Christ, and that growth and change is actually part of the gospel.